Don't tell my son, but I've stolen his gaming chair and his room. He's out working somewhere because today I want to talk to you about Shakespeare. Shakespeare, we have some literature we've looked at together as a class. I will just tell you online some very famous places because it's all online. You just go in and write the 2 sonnets he's written that we have looked at. Sonnets are his poems. Is sonnet 130. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. This is a strange poem where he says, my girlfriend's not perfect, but I love her anyway. And then the most famous sonnet of all, sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. That is perhaps a more classic, that he is in awe of her and that she will live eternally in his poetry for all time. So we have Shakespeare's awareness of love, and we see that in his sonnets. One talks about the lost years where he wasn't with his wife in Stratford-upon-Avon. What was he doing? Was he performing at the Globe in London? There's a film made saying, did he fall in love with someone to inspire him to write maybe probably the most famous love story on earth, Romeo and Juliet, which is a love story which is a tragedy. Now, before we get to that, he writes beautifully. We talk about his vocabulary. What was it? 30,000 words, we believe he had, which is a large vocabulary. And possibly he has invented 2,000 words himself. The famous examples being mountaineer, schoolboy, fortune teller, bandit, employer, manager, partner, critic, alligator, puppy dog, football, moonbeam, to elbow someone, to hurry, gloomy, fretful, worthless, lonely, quarrelsome, to mimic. That's a good thing about being a good artist. You play with the words. You're actually, I would say, because there's so much written about Shakespeare, you'll drown if you start looking on the internet. Literature gives you freedom to explore the realm of storytelling, and that is finally a personal story you retell. Even if it's Shakespeare stories, when I go in and interpret some of those plays, there's space for your own interpretation. You don't have to follow every detail that's written about Shakespeare and his life. You've seen Romeo and Juliet in the famous one with DiCaprio, and the famous words in the beginning of this tragedy, the star-struck lovers. I've tried to tell you how much Shakespeare is within what you call a cosmology. He's writing within a clear idea of a world where horrible things can happen, things can go terribly wrong, but also a world that can be resolved. And central to that for me to try and tell you is that cosmology. That's a more pre-modern, traditional way of understanding the world, that there is a cosmic harmony. There is a balance between the stars above us and the truth inside, to quote roughly Immanuel Kant, who is the famous philosopher moving from the old world into the modern world. In many ways, like Immanuel Kant, that is what Shakespeare is doing. He is bringing us from the old world of Greek mythology, where there is a cosmic harmony, where you can hear the bells ringing and all the stars moving in this beautiful harmonic movement. Music reveals that there is a cosmic harmony, because classical music is calming, also compelling, bringing out strong emotions, but the harmony between all the notes and how you can play with music is very much what you need to understand in a religious framework. There is something outside of ourselves, greater than ourselves, and for Shakespeare it's quite obviously the problems arise when humans start getting that wrong, and our egos, our selfish egos, become wrapped up in power games. In Romeo and Juliet, it's a classic always relevant. Parents having ambitions on behalf of their children, hatred between family members, and that you're willing to sacrifice the joy of your children to obtain a standing in society and to make peace, which is traditionally what families have done. You're just born to fit into this nice big family framework. Then you're not on your own. Where modern love is about being on your own, and you can say Romeo and Juliet is the tragedy of these two loving each other, but nobody else is interested in it. We talk about catharsis, which is a part of Greek theatre and tragedy. Catharsis is a cleansing of the soul. Traditionally, you would have watched Greek tragedy so that you could watch these the protagonist and the antagonist, the people on the stage with the music and the choir in the background, taking you through a human tragedy, a human story. You follow it. They're wearing masks because it has to be impersonal. Back then for the Greeks it wasn't personal because egos are not interesting. It was a ritual. They stood on the scene with the mask, very much in a religious framework with music and chanting and presentation. And at the end you sense that the dreadful things that had happened in this family tragedy were all somehow resolved, and the main person in the play who has messed up, at the end they realize, oh my goodness, what an idiot I've been, which can either lead to suicide or to a realization I've gone wrong. And Romeo and Juliet, it's right at the end, the families realize that we have to learn from this, that these star-crossed lovers, as in these lovers who were meant to be together, that was decided before time, before us, they are now together, but it could have been together in such a different way. And then you can compare that to A Midsummer Night's Dream, a play that you lot have been playing yourselves, which is very much the same beginning. Father says, no, you can't have him. But the difference here, we're in a comedy. A comedy means there's a resolution. And I've said it to you before, there is a symbolism in Shakespeare of the idea of human world and civilization being corrupt, with power games, with greed, with desire for ambition and influence, and then you have nature, which will always be the healing, greater than the petty human egos. And that's what we experience when we see Puck and the rest out in the forest. And they can get it wrong. And Oberon, king of the fairies, Titania, wife, it's not because things run smooth in their world. Which reminds me of the quote from Midsummer Night's Dream, the course of true love did never run smooth. No, it didn't. And it doesn't in the fairy world, and it doesn't in our world. But the comedy and getting it all wrong, it shows that there can be this healing outside force that can help human beings along, because there's a mystery of life, of why some people's life resolves itself and others can end in tragedy, even if no one has done anything evil. Suddenly things can go wrong and things can spiral out of control. You need some good luck, and you need some belief in that there is a higher resolution, there is something to resolve outside of yourself. So Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy of how the quotes that you need to look at here, of course, is the famous balcony scene, Act 2, Scene 2, Romeo and Juliet. You find it 2 seconds on the internet. The famous start by Romeo, but soft, what light through yonder window breaks? Is this the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. She is the center force of nature. She is light, the life giver. Even the moon is jealous of her. And that idea of the feminine nature being the fascination and driving force of life is very much part of Shakespeare's world. Nature as, again, larger than just a woman and a girl and a boy. There's something more important taking place in their love than just lust, desire, and a need for satisfaction. It brings us onto a kind of cosmic level, a religious level. Also, what we know the best with love can be that you become a better version of yourself. You are willing to sacrifice yourself for something beyond yourself. That is also quite central to understanding this and why the humans get it wrong when they don't let that love exist. I'll have to go on to the next film.